goes into the slot that is open. The first slot that's open, in fact, that matches. I guess we could prove that this works by going to our left hand and changing the slot type to foot, and going to our right hand and changing the slot type to foot, and going to our head and changing this to say it accepts something of type hand. If our head accepts hand objects and we go and we walk up to it, what do you expect to happen? Boink. It auto attaches to the first slot that matches. Okay? And maybe that's what we want. Or maybe it's not. That's entirely up to you. Let's undo that. Control Z is our friend. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Where were we? We want what do we need this thing to do next? You push punch and it spawns a fire flower. Or maybe it spawns fireballs automatically, even once it's equipped. Maybe it like auto shoots. Who cares? But we need to be able to spawn something because the flower is a projectile launcher. So we need what? There's some aspect to this thing's behavior that says it spawns things. So we're going to say it is a spawner. Okay? What object is a spawner? The flower. So it gets a spawner. Let's edit spawner. We go in. Spawner is a mixin. For a spawner to spawn, what does it need? It needs an obj to spawn. Is that too hip? Let's just do it like that. Obj to spawn. Is that better? Okay. Spawn copy of me, please. Great. So if something is a spawner, that means it implements, there's some specific aspect that it implements. What's the name of that method? Because we're going to want to call this when our punch button is pressed. What function does this thing actually implement? What aspect? Spawn. If obj to spawn, null. What was it? Instantiate. Obj to spawn. Where should it start?
At the object.
Probably we're going to need a spawn lock or a spawn locator, some point on the object relative to its center where we want it to start. For now, we could say spawn in the middle of the object. That's fine, but we may decide, that we want to let it have an offset somewhere. So what's our position? Just a chance in that position. And our orientation will be our rotation. And that's it, isn't it? I guess we can say we can that's a good question. Let's talk about that. Obj to spawn. Is the spawner the thing that gives the velocity to the projectile, or will the projectile say, I'm a projectile of this type, I have these properties, I'm going to have this velocity, I'm going to do this damage type, I'm going to look like this? We could go either way, but if we add velocity to the spawner, it means that somehow to spawn something means to give the thing that we spawn the velocity. And I don't know that, I think there might be a case where we want to spawn something that doesn't have a velocity. I don't know, maybe we're going to want to spawn a control point for a spline somewhere. Or maybe we're going to want to spawn, I don't know, an ammo drop or a coin. Hard to say. No? Okay. So we could. We might actually revisit this and see that we need to add it, but maybe we can cheap out and make our object be responsible for that. Okay. So we're gonna spawn something. What are we gonna spawn? We're gonna spawn a fireball, right? So let's make a fireball. Our fire flower is gonna make fireballs, so there's our thing. We're gonna call this a fireball. And we can make a decision here. There can be all kinds of projectiles. They can be under physics, they can be under kinematic, they can be under any kind of motion. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is that things that are spawned are projectiles. So we're going to say that our fireball is a projectile. So we're going to go back in, make sure that's a mix-in. What happened there? It's a JavaScript. Oh man, that's wrong. Don't be JavaScript. Don't ever be JavaScript. Go away. Give me your cool cousin. C# script is projectile.
It is familiar. I know we're not really using it, but that's a JavaScript.
It also is? Yeah. We'll have to fix that too. We can. Have we ever tried mixing JavaScript and C# in runtimes in Unity?
No.
Components can interoperate. The language constructs gets really weird, and the order in which the scripts are found in the editor also becomes important. But you can do it if you're like dropping in stuff from an asset you get on the asset store. There are ways and means. It's not an exact science. We could look at that later, especially if you're doing a capstone that needs it. Let's go back to fireball, and we're gonna say you're a projectile. Okay, we're gonna make a prefab out of it. So go back to assets, and we're gonna say our fireball, our fire flower spawns fireballs. So the prefab references the prefab, which means if we ever instantiate a fireball, it knows the kind of projectile it makes. It'd be really easy now to make an ice flower, right? Make a new prefab, make a new projectile. Change the color, you're done. The fireball, what do we want? How do we want the projectiles to behave? Are they going to be heat-seeking? Are they going to be, how do you want the motion to be? Some kind of sinusoidal thing?
I mean, the usual fireball sort of bounces along the ground kind of thing.
So we could do that with physics, or we could do that with code. I think it would be cool to do that with code. Come up with a formula that sort of makes it bounce. Oh, does it have to actually collide with the ground, wherever the ground is?
Yes, it does.
Is there one that doesn't? Like a super duper one, I think, doesn't. It's just like a giant blast.
I think there's one that just
That's also with like the Kuba car and the thing together, when it just launches a straight fireball.
Right.
So maybe we should just do a straight fireball to start with,
Okay.
just to get a hang of getting it to spawn and actually
Yeah.
doing things on command.
And at this point, I agree. We'll do that. And at this point, I mean, this is things we've done last term too, tweaking out the motion of things with physics and stuff. So yeah, we'll get it spawning. Let's get it spawning. I'm gonna cheap out, and I'm gonna say rigid body. I'm gonna give it a rigid body. And I'm gonna give it a constant force. And I'm gonna say move forward at a speed of 5 relative to your forward. So as long as the fireball has a Z forward out that way, we should be good to go. To test this, we're going to need a way to actually call spawn. At this point, we're going to want to call spawn, and we're going to want to call spawn not from the way we've been calling other mix-ins, right? Up until this point, it's all been collision events, right? On collision enter is where the work happens. But what is it going to do that actually spawns this thing? Let's make the firewall actually spawn it automatically, and then we'll make it connect to the punch button. Okay. So if something is a spawner, we're going to say if this spawner is equipped on a person, on a player in a slot, then spawn every 2 seconds. How can we check that? Oh, we want that in update. How can we check? How can we know if we're actually equipped? If we're equipped somewhere, it means that our parent game object is a game object that has an equipped slot. We can never be equipped on a game without having a parent that was a slot to be equipped in. Agreed? Okay. So if we have a slot above us, give our thing a spawn rate. And an internal variable t. On start, we'll say t equals spawn rate. And then every frame we'll say t equals minus equals time dot delta time. Not fixed delta time. Something like that. And we'll say our spawn rate is 2 seconds. Ooh, object reference not set to an object. Who's complaining? Who's complaining? Object not set to an instance of an object is spawner, line 22. What's the problem? So every frame we're calling update. What's the problem? Which one of these things is probably no? We're calling get component on what game object inside the spawner update?
The parent.
The parent of this current game object. So if it's not equipped, it means it doesn't have a parent. And calling get component on a null game object is what? Bad news. So we only want to do that if the parent is not null. And then we're only going to test parent obj. Better? You like that better? Let's see. Luckily, Unity's good at complaining. Cannot cast transform to game object. Uh-oh. Transform.parent is a transform. So we're gonna have to check if the parent transform is not null. And then get the component off the game object attached to that transform. There we go. Try it now. Boink. 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 And I'm gonna start rotating around. The fireballs are knocking me back. Why is our fireballs not red? Didn't I make them red?
You didn't add the cells its default material.
Ah. So the fireballs are coming out of the root object, they're coming out of the bottom of it, they're not coming out of the center of the flower. If we wanted the fireballs to come out of the center of the flower, what should we do?
Spawn location to the actual center part.
A nice data-driven way would be to add another game object where we want it and have that as spawn locator, and then the spawner would search its hierarchy for the spawn locator and then connect that reference. Have we seen that concept before? We could say the spawn locator is a spawn locator, and the spawner would search for the spawn locator. Again, we're using this concept of the hierarchy as a way of managing where functional pieces are inside of it. So it's just kind of looking into your data and then connecting the parts. But we're getting there, right? Should we do that? I think we're going to need to do that. For this fire flower to be useful, we're going to need to do that. So let's stop first.